Maya Chen always arrived at Roosevelt Middle School's music room exactly 5 minutes early. Not because she was eager to show off or impress anyone, but because those precious 5 minutes gave her time to find her favorite spot in the back corner and settle in before the chaos began. Every Tuesday and Thursday at 2:30 p.m., she would slip into that same worn plastic chair, the one with a small crack running down the left side that nobody else seemed to want. From there, she had the perfect view of the beautiful black grand piano that dominated the center of the room. The instrument looked almost magical under the fluorescent lights, its polished surface reflecting the afternoon sun that streamed through the tall windows. Maya had been coming to these free music lessons for 3 months now, and not once had she touched those keys. While other kids fought over who got to play first or complained about having to practice scales, Maya just watched. She watched everything. The way Mrs. Patterson's fingers curved perfectly as they danced across the white and black keys. How Mr. Rodriguez would tap his foot to keep time, his head nodding along with the rhythm. She noticed how some students pressed the keys too hard, making harsh sounds, while others barely touched them at all, creating whispers instead of music. But Maya saw more than just technique. She saw the stories that lived inside each piece of music. When Jenny Kim played her simple version of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, Maya could picture actual stars twinkling in a dark sky. When Alex Rivera stumbled through Happy Birthday, she imagined birthday parties and laughing children. Music wasn't just sounds to Maya. It was a whole world of feelings and pictures that painted themselves in her mind. The other kids didn't know that. Maya went home every day and replayed every single note she had heard in her head. Her family lived in a tiny apartment above her parents' friend's restaurant, where the smell of cooking oil and spices filled the air and the sounds of clinking dishes never stopped. Her mom and dad worked from sunrise to way past sunset, speaking mostly Chinese to each other and broken English to their customers. They loved Maya deeply, but they didn't understand why she spent so much time thinking about music. Music no pay bills, her father would say gently when Maya asked about piano lessons. He wasn't being mean. He was just worried about practical things like rent and food and Maya's future. In their small hometown in China, music was something rich people did for fun, not something that could help a family survive in America. So Maya learned to be content with watching and listening. She discovered that if she paid close enough attention, during the lessons, she could memorize entire pieces just by observing. She would watch Mrs. Patterson demonstrate a new song, noting which fingers pressed which keys and in what order. Then later, lying in her narrow bed above the restaurant kitchen, she would move her fingers against her blanket, practicing the movements over and over until they felt natural. Maya had a secret that she had never told anyone. Sometimes late at night, when the restaurant finally closed and her parents were asleep, she would sneak out to the 24-hour library downtown. The old computers there had internet access, and Maya had discovered YouTube videos of piano performances. She would sit in those uncomfortable plastic chairs for hours, wearing the cheap headphones that always seemed to have a crackling sound, watching the greatest pianists in the world perform pieces she could only dream of playing. She watched everything from simple children's songs to incredibly complex classical pieces that made her heart race with excitement. Maya found that she could follow along with the music, even the complicated parts. Her eyes would track the pianist's fingers, and somehow her brain would make sense of the patterns. She began to understand that music had rules, like a language, and she was slowly learning to speak it just by listening. At school, Maya was known as the quiet kid who never caused trouble. Her teachers liked her because she always did her homework and never disrupted class, but they also worried that she seemed too shy, too withdrawn. They didn't know that inside her mind, Maya was anything but quiet. She was constantly thinking about music, replaying melodies, imagining herself at a piano. bench, feeling the smooth keys under her fingertips. During regular school hours, Maya would sometimes catch herself tapping out rhythms on her desk during math class or humming quietly during lunch. Her classmates probably thought she was just being fidgety, but Maya was actually practicing. She was working through pieces she had memorized, keeping the music alive in her mind even when she couldn't hear it. The hardest part about the music lessons wasn't that she couldn't play. The hardest part was listening to other students complain about things Maya would have given anything to experience. When Tommy would groan about having to practice for 30 minutes at home, Maya's heart would ache with longing. When Lisa would roll her eyes about her parents making her take lessons, Maya would think about how lucky Lisa was to have parents who could afford such a gift. But Maya never felt bitter or jealous. Instead, she felt grateful for every moment she got to spend in that music room. Even if she couldn't play, she was learning. Every lesson taught her something new about music theory, about rhythm, about the way different notes work together to create harmony. She absorbed every explanation Mrs. Patterson gave about finger positioning, every tip Mr. Rodriguez shared about reading sheet music. Maya's notebook from her regular classes was filled with tiny musical notes drawn in the margins. She would write down interesting things she learned during music lessons, creating her own system for remembering which finger played which note. Her English teacher had noticed these little drawings and asked Maya about them once, but Maya had just shrugged and said they helped her think. As the weeks passed, Maya began to notice that she could predict what would happen next in pieces she was hearing for the first time. She could sense when a melody was building toward an exciting climax or when it was about to slow down and become gentle. Music was starting to make sense to her in a way that felt almost magical, like she was discovering a secret language that had always been there, waiting for her to understand it. The announcement about the spring recital had come during a particularly cold Thursday in February. Mrs. Patterson had explained that every student would need to perform a piece for their families and friends, and Maya's stomach had dropped. She had known this moment would come eventually, but she had been hoping it would be much further in the future. Walking home through the light snow that was just beginning to fall, Maya had made a decision. She was going to find a way to practice, even if it meant being creative about how she did it. She was going to perform at that recital, and she was going to make her parents proud, even if they didn't quite understand why music mattered so much to her. Maya didn't know it yet, but her quiet months of watching and learning had prepared her for something extraordinary. Her mind had been building a foundation of musical knowledge that would soon surprise everyone, including herself. All she needed was the right moment and the right opportunity to show what she had been quietly learning all along. 3 weeks before the spring recital, the music room felt different. There was a heavy tension in the air that Maya could sense the moment she walked through the door. Usually, the room buzzed with a normal mix of excitement and nervousness. That came with learning music. But today, frustration seemed to hang over everything like a thick cloud. Maya took her usual spot in the back corner, but instead of the peaceful observation she was used to, she found herself watching a room full of stressed-out students. Tommy Martinez sat at the piano bench, his shoulders hunched forward as he stared at the sheet music in front of him. His hands hovered over the keys like he was afraid to touch them. When he finally did press down, the notes that came out sounded choppy and uncertain. "I can't do this," Tommy muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This piece is way too hard. My fingers just won't move fast enough." Tommy had been taking piano lessons for 2 years, longer than most of the other kids in the class. He was usually confident, sometimes even a little cocky about his playing. But today, he looked defeated. The piece of music sitting on the piano stand was a Chopin nocturne, full of flowing melodies and delicate runs that required years of practice to master. Mrs. Patterson walked over and placed a gentle hand on Tommy's shoulder. "Remember, "It's not about speed right now," she said in her patient teacher voice. "Focus on getting the notes right first. The flow will come with practice." But Tommy just shook his head. "I've been practicing this for 3 weeks straight. My mom makes me sit at the piano for an hour every day after school. I'm not getting any better. If anything, I'm getting worse." Across the room, Linda Williams was having her own struggle with a batch invention. Her piece was supposed to sound like two separate melodies dancing together, but instead it sounded like a musical argument where nobody was winning. Linda's face was red with frustration, and Maya could see her blinking back tears. "I hate this." "Stupid piece," Linda said under her breath, but in the quiet room, everyone heard her. "Why can't we just play normal songs? Why does everything have to be so complicated?" Other students nodded in agreement. Jessica Park, who was working on a Mozart sonata, looked up from her music with relief, happy that someone else had voiced what they were all thinking. Even calm, usually confident David Chun was frowning at his Beethoven piece like it had personally insulted him. Mr. Rodriguez had been standing quietly by the window, watching his students struggle. He was known for his sense of humor and his ability to make even the most difficult music lessons feel fun. But Maya could see that he was getting frustrated too, though for different reasons than the students. "You know what the problem is here?" Mr. Rodriguez said suddenly, his voice cutting through the grumbling and complaining. The room went quiet and everyone turned to look at him. He walked slowly to the center of the room, his hands clasped behind his back. Maya had seen this look on his face before. It was the expression he got when he was about to make a point that would either inspire his students or challenge them in a way they weren't expecting. "The problem," he continued, "is that you're all thinking these pieces are impossible. You've convinced yourselves that the music is too hard, so you've already given up before you really tried." Tommy looked up from the piano bench. "But Mr. Rodriguez, this stuff really is too hard. These composers were geniuses. They probably started playing when they were like 3 years old." "Yeah," Linda added, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "No kid our age should be expected to play this level of music. It's not fair." Mr. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow, and Maya could see a mischievous glint starting to form in his eyes. This was the look he got when he was about to do something unexpected. "Too hard?" he repeated, walking over to a tall filing cabinet in the corner of the room. "You think what you're playing is too hard?" He opened the top drawer and started flipping through folders of sheet music. The students watched nervously as he searched for something specific. Mrs. Patterson shot him a warning look, but he ignored her. "Let me show you what impossible actually looks like," Mr. Rodriguez said, pulling out a thick folder of music. He walked to the piano and spread out several pages of sheet music across the top. Maya couldn't see the music clearly from her seat in the back, but she could tell from the other students' expressions that whatever Mr. Rodriguez had just put down was intimidating. The pages were covered with tiny black notes, more notes than Maya had ever seen on a single page. "This," Mr. Rodriguez announced dramatically, "is Franz Liszt's La Campanella. It's considered one of the most technically demanding pieces ever written for piano. The speed required is inhuman. The hand stretches are enormous. Most professional pianists spend months or even years preparing to perform this piece, and many never attempt it at all." He pointed to different sections of the music, and even from her distance, Maya could see that the pages looked incredibly dense and complex. "Look at these passages here. The right hand has to play melody and harmony at the same time while jumping across the entire keyboard. The left hand has these massive chord progressions that require perfect timing and strength that takes decades to develop." The students gathered around the piano, their own problems suddenly seeming much smaller. Maya found herself leaning forward in her chair, straining to hear every word. This piece, Mr. Rodriguez continued, requires perfect pitch, lightning-fast reflexes, incredible hand independence, and musical maturity that only comes from years of advanced study. It's so difficult that some music schools use it as a graduation requirement for their most advanced students. Tommy let out a low whistle. Okay, that does look impossible. Exactly my point, Mr. Rodriguez said with a satisfied smile. What you're working on is challenging, yes, but it's absolutely within your reach if you practice properly and believe in yourselves. This, on the other hand, truly is impossible for middle school students. Mrs. Patterson was shaking her head, clearly, knowing where this was heading. Rodriguez, what are you doing? But he was already committed to his idea. Maya watched as he looked around the room at all the frustrated faces staring back at him. In fact, he said, I'm so confident that this piece is beyond what any middle schooler could handle. I'm willing to make a bet. If any student in this room can play even the opening section of La Campanella convincingly, I'll excuse them from all practice requirements for the rest of the semester. The room erupted. Students started talking excitedly, some laughing at the impossibility of the challenge, others immediately interested in the reward. Are you serious? Jessica asked. No practice for the whole semester? Dead serious, Mr. Rodriguez replied. But I'm not worried about losing this bet. This piece is truly impossible for students your age and experience level. Maya felt something strange happening in her chest. While the other students were focused on the reward or laughing about how impossible the challenge was, Maya found herself thinking about the music itself. From her seat in the back, she couldn't see all the details of the sheet music, but something about what Mr. Rodriguez had described was calling to her. She had heard of Liszt before. During her late-night sessions at the library, she remembered watching a video of a famous pianist performing something incredibly fast and beautiful with notes that seemed to sparkle like bells. Could that have been this piece? So who's brave enough to try? Mr. Rodriguez asked, looking around the room. With a grin. Anyone want to take on the impossible? One by one, students shook their heads. Even Tommy, who was usually up for any challenge, just laughed and said, I can barely handle Chopin. I'm not about to embarrass myself with Liszt. Linda giggled nervously. I think I'll stick with my batch, thanks. Maya felt her heart starting to beat faster. Something was pulling her toward that piano, toward that impossible music. She didn't understand why, but every instinct in her body was telling her that she needed to see those pages, needed to try Dot as the other students started returning to their own music, and the normal lesson resumed. Maya remained frozen in her chair, staring at the sheet music still spread across the piano. In her mind, she could almost hear echoes of the sparkling melodies she remembered from that late-night library video. For the first time in 3 months of sitting quietly in the back corner, Maya felt an overwhelming urge to raise her hand and speak up. The impossible challenge was calling to her, and she had no idea why. The lesson was winding down, and Maya could feel the familiar heaviness that always came when it was time to leave the music room. Students were packing up their music books and getting ready to head home, but the challenging piece still lay, spread across the piano like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Maya couldn't stop staring at those pages. From her seat in the back corner, the tiny black notes looked like a secret code that somehow felt familiar, even though she had never seen this particular piece before. Her fingers were unconsciously moving against her leg, as if trying to work out patterns that her mind was already beginning to understand. That the strange pulling sensation in her chest was getting stronger. It was like when you're really thirsty and someone puts a glass of cold water in front of you, except instead of wanting water, every part of Maya's being wanted to touch those piano keys and see if the sounds in her head could become real. All right, everyone, same time Thursday, Mrs. Patterson announced as students started filing toward the door. And remember, the recital is only 3 weeks away. Make sure you're practicing every day." Tommy was grumbling as he shoved his choppin' music into his backpack. Easy for her to say. She's not the one trying to make her fingers move like a machine. Linda laughed bitterly as she zipped up her bag. "At least you don't have batch making your brain hurt. I swear these old composers were trying to torture kids on purpose." Maya watched as Mr. Rodriguez started gathering up the list music from the piano. Each page he picked up felt like an opportunity slipping away. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. She had spent 3 months in this room without ever speaking up, never drawing attention to herself, never asking for anything. But something was different today. The music was calling to her in a way she couldn't ignore. Maya stood up from her chair, and her legs felt shaky underneath her. She took a small step toward the piano, then stopped. What was she doing? She had never played a real piano in her life. She didn't even know if she could reach the pedals properly. The other kids would think she was crazy, but her feet kept moving forward anyway. Maya said, so quietly that nobody heard her. She cleared her throat and tried again, a little louder this time. Mr. Rodriguez?" The teacher looked up from the sheet music he was organizing, surprised to hear Maya's voice. In 3 months of lessons, she had never spoken unless directly asked a question. "Yes, Maya?" Maya's mouth felt completely dry. She could feel the other students turning to look at her, and her face started burning with embarrassment. But the pulling sensation toward the music was stronger than her fear. "I would like to try," she said, the words coming out in a rush before she could change her mind. The room fell completely silent. Tommy stopped mid-complain about his chopping piece. Linda froze with her backpack halfway over her shoulder. Even Mrs. Patterson, who had been erasing notes from the whiteboard, turned around to stare. "Try what?" Mr. Rodriguez asked gently, though. Maya could see in his eyes that he already knew what she meant. "The impossible piece," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to try the challenge." For a moment, nobody moved or spoke. Then Tommy let out a loud laugh that echoed off the walls. "Maya? You want to try La Campanella?" Tommy shook his head in disbelief. "You've never even played Mary Had a Little Lamb all the way through. This is the hardest piece in the world." Other students started murmuring to each other. Maya heard fragments of their conversations floating around her. "Is she serious? She's never even touched the piano. Maybe she doesn't understand how hard it is." Maya felt her face getting hotter, but she forced herself to stay standing. She looked directly at Mr. Rodriguez, ignoring the whispers around her. "I know I've never played before," she said, her voice getting a tiny bit stronger. "But I've been watching. I've been listening, and I want to try." Mrs. Patterson walked over and put a gentle hand on Maya's shoulder. Her touch was warm and comforting. But Maya could see the concern in her teacher's eyes. "Maya, sweetheart," Mrs. Patterson said softly, "this piece is incredibly difficult. Professional pianists spend years preparing for it. Maybe we should focus on getting you comfortable with your recital piece first. Mary Had a Little Lamb is a perfect place to start." Maya knew Mrs. Patterson was being kind, trying to protect her from embarrassment. But the mention of Mary Had a Little Lamb made something twist in Maya's stomach. She had memorized that simple piece after hearing it just once 3 months ago. Every night, she played it in her head over and over, and it felt like being hungry but only being allowed to eat tiny crumbs. "I understand it's difficult," Maya said, looking back and forth between her 2 teachers. "But I really want to try, please." Mr. Rodriguez was studying Maya's face with an expression she couldn't quite read. He had always been the teacher who encouraged students to take risks, to push themselves beyond what felt safe. But this was different. This was a student who had never played, asking to attempt something that challenged professional musicians. "Maya," he said slowly, "you do realize that this piece requires techniques that take years to develop? The hand positions alone are extremely complex. Most students your age couldn't even physically reach some of the chord progressions." Maya nodded, but she didn't back down. "I know, but I still want to try." Linda had been watching this exchange with growing confusion. "Maya, I don't think you understand. This isn't like the YouTube videos where people make it look easy. This is real music. It's really hard." "I've seen the YouTube videos," Maya said quietly, and several students looked surprised. They probably hadn't expected Quiet Maya to know anything about classical piano performances online. Tommy laughed again, but this time it sounded less mean and more nervous. "Watching videos isn't the same as playing, Maya. Your fingers don't know what to do just from watching." Maya looked down at her hands. Her fingers were small and definitely not as long as those of the pianists she had watched online. But when she closed her eyes, she could feel the patterns of movement she had memorized from months of careful observation. "Maybe you're right," she said. "Maybe I can't do it. But I want to find out." The room was quiet again, but this time the silence felt different. It wasn't the silence of shock or amusement. It was the silence of people trying to figure out what was happening. Mr. Rodriguez looked at Mrs. Patterson, and Maya saw them have one of those wordless conversations that teachers sometimes have. Mrs. Patterson's expression was worried, but Mr. Rodriguez looked curious, almost intrigued. "Are you absolutely sure about this, Maya?" Mr. Rodriguez asked. "There's no shame in waiting until you have more experience. This challenge will still be here next year or the year after." Maya thought about next year. She thought about sitting in the back corner for another year, watching other people play while her fingers moved against her desk. She thought about the music videos she watched alone in the library, imagining what it would feel like to create those beautiful sounds herself. "I'm sure," she said. Mr. Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. Then he made a decision that would change everything. "All right," he said, walking back to the piano and spreading out the list music again. "If you're determined to try this, then let's see what happens." Maya's heart jumped with excitement and terror at the same time. The other students gathered around, some looking supportive, others clearly expecting to witness a disaster. Mrs. Patterson pulled out her phone. "I'm calling your parents to let them know you'll be a few minutes late," she said to Maya. "They should probably know about this." Maya nodded, though her mind was completely focused on the piano bench that was now just a few steps away. As she walked toward it, the room seemed to get both bigger and smaller at the same time. The piano looked enormous, like a mountain she was about to try to climb. But when Maya sat down on the bench and looked at the sheet music spread out in front of her, something extraordinary began to happen. The tiny black notes that had looked like impossible puzzles from across the room suddenly started to make sense, like words in a language she had always known how to read. Maya's hands were shaking as she placed them on the piano keys for the very first time. The smooth, cool surface felt exactly like she had imagined during all those months of watching from the back corner. Her feet barely reached the pedals, and she had to scoot forward on the bench to get close enough to the keyboard. The sheet music spread out in front of her looked like a mountain of tiny black dots, but something amazing was happening in her mind. As Maya stared at the notes, they weren't just random marks on paper anymore. They were starting to form patterns, like a secret code that her brain was automatically translating into sounds and movements. Behind her, she could hear the other students shifting nervously. Tommy whispered something to Linda, but Maya couldn't make out the words. Mrs. Patterson had moved closer, probably ready to gently stop this experiment before Maya embarrassed herself. Mr. Rodriguez stood with his arms crossed, watching carefully. His expression unreadable. Maya took a deep breath and placed her right index finger on middle C. The single note rang out clear and pure in the quiet room. It was the first piano note she had ever played, and the sound sent a thrill through her entire body. This was what she had been missing all these months. She looked at the first measure of the Liszt piece and tried to match what she saw on the page with the keys in front of her. The opening was deceptively simple looking, just a few notes that seemed easy enough. But Maya knew from watching videos that this piece started quietly before exploding into incredibly complex passages. Her finger found the first note, then the second. The melody began to emerge, hesitant at first, like someone learning to walk. But with each note, something extraordinary started happening. Maya's fingers seemed to remember movements she had never actually made before. All those months of watching Mrs. Patterson's hands, of memorizing finger positions and patterns, were suddenly coming alive. By the end of the first phrase, Maya's playing had gained confidence. The notes were flowing more smoothly, and she was beginning to add the subtle dynamics that made music come alive. She wasn't just hitting the right keys anymore. She was making music. Tommy stopped whispering. Linda's mouth fell open slightly. Mrs. Patterson took a step closer, her eyebrows raised in surprise. Maya continued into the second section, where the piece began to show its true complexity. Her left hand joined in with a simple accompaniment pattern, and somehow her hands knew exactly how to work together, even though she had never practiced coordination between them. It was like her brain had been preparing for this moment without her even realizing it. The music room had become completely silent except for the sound of Maya's playing. Even the usual noises from the hallway seemed to have stopped. Everyone was frozen, listening to something that shouldn't have been possible. As Maya moved deeper into the piece, her natural musicality began to shine through. She wasn't just playing the notes correctly. She was interpreting them, adding little touches of expression that revealed an understanding of the music that went far beyond technical skill. When the melody called for sadness, her touch became gentler. When it built toward excitement, her playing grew more energetic. Mr. Rodriguez slowly sat down in a nearby chair, his challenge completely forgotten. His eyes were wide with disbelief. In 20 years of teaching, he had never seen anything like this. Maya reached a section where the right hand had to play rapid scales while the left hand maintained a steady rhythm. This was the kind of passage that took advanced students months to master, but Maya's fingers seemed to find the patterns instinctively. The scales flowed like water, each note crystal clear and perfectly timed. "This is impossible," Linda whispered, so quietly that only the people standing next to her could hear. But Maya wasn't paying attention to the whispers or the stares. She was completely lost in the music, experiencing for the first time what it felt like to transform the sounds in her head into reality. Every note felt like coming home, like she was finally doing what she was meant to do. The piece continued to grow more challenging, and Maya continued to meet each new demand with an ease that defied explanation. Her small hands stretched across the keyboard with surprising agility. Her fingers moved with a kind of independence that usually took years of exercises to develop. Mrs. Patterson
found herself holding her breath.
She had taught hundreds of students over the years, from complete beginners to quite advanced players. But she had never witnessed anything like what was happening right now. Maya wasn't just playing difficult music. She was making it sing. Maya reached a particularly demanding section where both hands had to play complex melodies at the same time. This was where even professional pianists sometimes struggled, where the coordination required was almost superhuman. For a moment, Maya hesitated, her hands hovering over the keys as her mind worked out the patterns. Then something clicked, and her hands began moving in perfect synchronization. The two melodies wove together like dancers, each part distinct but perfectly balanced with the other. The sound that filled the room was so beautiful that Jessica actually gasped out loud. But as Maya continued to play, the physical demands of the piece were beginning to catch up with her inexperience. Her hands were getting tired from stretches that her muscles weren't trained for. Some of the chord progressions required her to span distances that her small fingers simply couldn't reach. Still, she pushed forward, determined to play as much as she could. Even when she had to skip notes that were physically impossible for her to play, the music remained coherent and beautiful. Her musical intuition was so strong that she instinctively knew which notes were essential and which ones could be left out without destroying the overall effect. Maya made it through nearly 2 full pages of the most difficult piano music ever written before her limitations finally forced her to stop. Her hands were cramping slightly, and she had reached a passage that required techniques she simply didn't have the physical development to execute. She played one final, soft chord and lifted her hands from the keys. The silence that followed was unlike anything anyone in that room had ever experienced. It wasn't the normal quiet that came after a student performance, where teachers politely clapped and offered encouragement. This was the silence of people trying to process something that had fundamentally changed their understanding of what was possible. Maya looked up from the piano, suddenly aware again of where she was and who was watching her. She saw the faces staring back at her, all wearing the same expression of stunned disbelief. For a moment, she worried that she had done something wrong. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, her voice barely audible in the silent room. "I know it wasn't perfect. I could hear the mistakes I was making. My hands aren't big enough for some of the stretches, and I don't know the proper fingering techniques for the really fast parts." Mr. Rodriguez slowly stood up from his chair, running his hands through his hair. His face had gone pale, and he looked like someone who had just witnessed something that challenged everything he thought he knew about music education. "Maya," he said, his voice shaky, "how long have you been playing piano?" Maya looked confused by the question. "I haven't been playing. That was my first time touching a real piano." Tommy let out a sound that was half laugh, half gasp. "That's impossible. Nobody plays like that the first time they touch a piano." "But I've been watching," Maya explained, still not understanding why everyone looked so shocked. "I've been listening to every lesson. I've memorized all the finger positions and techniques you've taught. I watch piano videos at the library. I practice the movements in my head." Mrs. Patterson walked over to the piano bench, her legs feeling unsteady. She sat down next to Maya, looking at her with an expression of wonder and confusion. "Maya," she said gently, "what you just played is considered one of the most difficult pieces in all of classical music. Professional concert pianists spend months preparing to perform it. Most people your age couldn't even read the sheet music, let alone play it." Maya looked back at the music still spread across the piano. "But it made sense to me. The patterns were logical. I could see how the melodies fit together." Mr. Rodriguez was shaking his head slowly. "In 20 years of teaching, I've never seen anything like this. Maya, I think you might have what people call perfect pitch, and your musical memory is extraordinary." Maya didn't fully understand what that meant, but she could see that something important had just happened. The other students were still staring at her like she had just performed magic. Mrs. Patterson looked like she was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't make sense. What Maya didn't know was that she had just revealed a gift so rare that most music teachers encounter it maybe once in their entire career. She had demonstrated the kind of natural musical ability that appears in perhaps one person out of millions, the kind of talent that changes lives and creates legends. The quiet girl from the back corner had just shown everyone that sometimes the most extraordinary gifts come in the most unexpected packages. The first person to break the stunned silence was Tommy. He walked slowly to the piano, staring at Maya like she had just transformed into someone completely different right before his eyes. "Maya," he said, his voice filled with awe, "that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard anyone play. How did you do that?" Maya looked around the room at all the faces staring back at her, still not fully understanding why everyone seemed so shocked. To her, what had just happened felt natural, like finally being able to speak a language she had always understood but never had the chance to use. "I just listened to what the music was telling me," she said simply. "The notes on the page showed me where to put my fingers, and my brain filled in the rest." Mrs. Patterson was shaking her head in disbelief. "Maya, what you just did is not normal. The piece you played takes most pianists years to learn, and you sight read it like it was a simple children's song." Mr. Rodriguez had pulled out his phone and was already dialing a number. "I need to call Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell at the university," he said to Mrs. Patterson. "She needs to hear about this immediately." "Who's Dr. Hartwell?" Maya asked, feeling a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. "She's one of the most respected piano teachers in the state," Mrs. Patterson explained gently. "She specializes in working with exceptionally gifted students. If anyone can help us understand what just happened here, it's her." While Mr. Rodriguez stepped into the hallway to make his phone call, the other students gathered around Maya, their earlier complaints about their own pieces completely forgotten. "Maya, this is insane," Linda said, her eyes still wide with amazement. "I've been taking lessons for 3 years, and I can barely get through a simple batch piece." "You just played Liszt like you've been doing it your whole life." Jessica nodded enthusiastically. "You have to teach me how you did that. There's no way someone just learns to play like that from watching." But Maya was starting to feel overwhelmed by all the attention. For 3 months, she had been perfectly content being invisible in the back corner. Now everyone was looking at her like she was some kind of miracle, and she didn't know how to handle it. "I don't think I can teach it," Maya said quietly. "I don't really understand how I did it either. It just felt right." Mrs. Patterson recognized the signs of a student becoming overwhelmed and gently guided the other kids toward gathering their things. "Let's give Maya some space to process what just happened," she said. "This is a lot for anyone to handle." Mr. Rodriguez came back into the room, his face flushed with excitement. "Dr. Hartwell wants to meet with Maya as soon as possible. She's canceling her afternoon appointments and driving down here right now." Maya felt her heart start racing again. "Is that good or bad?" "It's very good," Mr. Rodriguez assured her. "Dr. Hartwell doesn't change her schedule for just anyone. The fact that she's dropping everything to come here means she understands how extraordinary what you just did really is." While they waited for Dr. Hartwell to arrive, Mrs. Patterson called Maya's parents. Maya could hear her trying to explain the situation in simple English, knowing that her parents' understanding was limited. "Your daughter is very talented," Mrs. Patterson was saying into the phone. "Very, very talented. We need you to come to school so we can talk about special opportunities for her." Maya listened to the one-sided conversation, imagining her mother's confusion on the other end of the line. Her parents were probably wondering if she had gotten in trouble for something. 20 minutes later, Dr. Hartwell arrived at the school. She was a tall, elegant woman with silver hair and kind eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Maya had expected someone intimidating, but Dr. Hartwell had a warm presence that immediately put her at ease. "So you're the young lady I've been hearing about," Dr. Hartwell said, extending her hand to Maya. "I'm Elizabeth Hartwell. I understand you've just given your teachers quite a surprise." Maya shook her hand shyly. "I guess so. I just wanted to try the piece." Dr. Hartwell smiled. "And try it you did, from what I'm told. Would you mind playing something for me? Anything you'd like." Maya looked toward the piano, then back at Dr. Hartwell. "I don't really know any other pieces. I've only ever played that one." "Then play." "That one again," Dr. Hartwell said, pulling up a chair next to the piano bench. "But this time, I'd like you to try something. Instead of looking at the sheet music, try playing it from memory." Maya felt a moment of panic. From memory? "But I only played it once." "Just try," Dr. Hartwell encouraged. "See what happens." Maya sat down at the piano bench again and closed her eyes, trying to remember the feeling of the music flowing through her fingers. To her amazement, she could recall every note, every phrase, every delicate touch that had made the piece come alive. She began to play, and this time, without the sheet music to distract her, the music flowed even more naturally. Her interpretation was more confident, more expressive. She played for nearly 5 minutes, recreating most of what she had played before and even adding small musical touches that felt right to her. When she finished, Dr. Hartwell was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to Mr. Rodriguez and Mrs. Patterson. "In 30 years of teaching piano, I have never encountered natural ability like this," she said softly. "This child has perfect pitch, extraordinary musical memory, and an intuitive understanding of musical structure that is simply unprecedented." Maya's parents arrived just as Dr. Hartwell was finishing her evaluation. They looked nervous and confused, clearly unsure why they had been called to school. Mrs. Patterson and Dr. Hartwell spent nearly an hour explaining the situation, with Mr. Rodriguez translating some of the more complex concepts into simpler. Maya watched her parents' faces change from worry to confusion to amazement as they began to understand what had happened. Her father kept shaking his head and saying, "But she never played piano before. How this possible?" Dr. Hartwell patiently explained that Maya appeared to have a combination of natural gifts that appeared perhaps once in a generation. She talked about perfect pitch, about musical savants, about the kind of rare talent that could lead to extraordinary opportunities. "What this mean for Maya's future?" her mother asked, her English careful but clear. "It means," Dr. Hartwell said gently, "that with proper training, Maya could become one of the finest pianists of her generation. But she'll need intensive instruction, access to quality instruments, and opportunities to develop her gift." The conversation that followed changed Maya's life forever. Dr. Hartwell arranged for Maya to receive a full scholarship to the university's youth conservatory program. A local music lover who had heard about Maya's story donated a beautiful upright piano for the family's apartment. Most importantly, Maya would finally have access to the kind of training and opportunities that her extraordinary gift deserved. 6 months later, Maya stood on the stage of the state youth piano competition, wearing a simple black dress that Mrs. Patterson had helped her pick out. The same piece that had started this incredible journey, Liszt's La Campanella, was now polished to perfection under Dr. Hartwell's expert guidance. As Maya began to play, the audience of hundreds fell completely silent. But this time, Maya wasn't nervous. She had found her voice, and it spoke the language of music more fluently than she had ever spoken any words. The performance was flawless. Every note sparkled with the clarity and brilliance that gave the piece its name. Maya's small hands, strengthened by months of proper training, now moved across the keyboard with the confidence of someone who had finally come home. When she played the final, triumphant chord, the audience erupted in applause that seemed to go on forever. Maya took her bow, and through the bright stage lights, she could see Mr. Rodriguez and Mrs. Patterson in the audience, both wiping tears from their eyes. Later, holding her first-place trophy, Maya thought about the girl who used to sit quietly in the back corner of the music room, watching other people play simple melodies while she dreamed of something more. That girl was still part of her, but now she was also something new, a pianist, a performer, a young person whose extraordinary gift had finally found its voice. The impossible challenge that had started as a teacher's frustrated moment had revealed a talent that would inspire thousands. Maya's journey was just beginning, but she had already learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the quietest voices when they finally find the courage to sing.